tonight. Thank you for coming all. It's quite a journey, and I'm very happy that you're all here. Tonight I'm going to tell a little bit about me, my history, and about what I'm doing. I use English because there are some people that do not understand Dutch. So if you don't understand English very well, there will be a little movie on the internet, and it will be subtitled, so you can review what I say tonight. In Dutch it will be subtitled, yes. Thank you very much. And maybe in Chinese, but I have to ask my sister for that. So, well, this is me a while ago. And, I was a bit more hairy, and I had a bit more fat on the bones. But what is really important is that I liked kiting a lot. And you see some things around here. Kiting that time, 99, was flying with these kind of things. Some of you know it. I think some of you I took along kiting on the beach. These kites were a lot of fun, but very, very dangerous to go on water. And it was because if they took water, they would drag you along the current, and it was really, really dangerous. Well, some people had some solutions about that, and one of that is Mr. Panhuizen, a Dutch guy, Gijs Bertus Panhuizen. He tried also to kite. He had a sort of parachute kind of kite, which was also quite dangerous in the water. And I would like to introduce you to this guy. This is Mr. Bruno Legagenoux. His name is also on this orange kite you see here behind. He was the inventor of the tube kite. And this person really introduced a new sport. And not just a sport. This sport is nowadays going to be an Olympic, part of the Olympic Games. It was a discussion that it was already in Rio de Janeiro, but it is probably 4 years later, 2020. So actually new sports emerge from innovation, and that is truly gravity defying in a true sense. So what is this innovation kind of thing? It is, I'm going to use an analogy. It used to be the title of my speech, Innovation is Better Than Sex. But I think it is a bit difficult, so I didn't. But I'm going to compare innovation with sex. And there are some similarities. One, of course, it's profound fun. But if you ask people like, hey, what would you like to do more? Innovate or have sex? Most people would say, well, I like to have sex. But if you ask people, what would you like to prefer to earn your money with? I think most people would say innovation. I think. So I'm just going to show you some similarities. One of the similarities between innovation and sex is that there's an opposing force field. And with sex, the opposing force field is much between people. In innovation, there's also an opposing force field. And that is mostly like you want to do something, but you can't because there's something hindering you. In this case, you want to fly, but hey, you're too heavy. And I know how this feels. So both in innovation and in sex, there's a conception. The development of an idea. And actually, if you look at sex, it is like a sperm cell trying to get inside an egg cell. And once he is in, the sperm cell loses his tail, loses his booster engine, you can say, and merges with the egg cell. And it's really a sort of fusion of information. Well, if you look at innovation, there's some kind of the same thing. You have a thought, you have a problem, and you have a solution, and this solution you add to the state of the art. And the state of the art, especially in patents, is like anything that is known to public. So you add something new, and only if that something is really new, then you can get a patent for it. But it is also a fusion of information. And that's, it's quite funny. Well, what kind of information do we speak about? With sex, it's about 3 billion base pairs, coding for about 33,000 patents. It's about the same, how would I say, density of information. And this is about 600 meters of archive. If you look at the total archive of the city of Amsterdam, all the transport of the, how would I say, all the houses, then it's about this number, 600 meters of archive. So that's about life. But only 3% of this information is really coding. The rest of the DNA is non-coding. If you look at patents, and you look at all the commercial patents that are out there, that's about 3% of all the patents. The rest is junk. So both in sex and in innovation, 97% is junk. It's good to know. It is not that I say that it's for nothing. It is really in order to get this 3%, you have to get through this 97%. You won't get there else. So then there's a pregnancy. Both in innovation and in sex there's a pregnancy. You see the little arrows? With innovation, the pregnancy is in the head. And well, after sex, the pregnancy most of the time is more down here. After this pregnancy, you have the birth of a sort of a prototype, an ugly prototype. And well, in this case, you see, well, this is the first prototype of a digital camera. And the other, well, you see, mostly the prototype is functional, but not as nice as you would see. And there's another thing, there's a very strong bond between the creator and the product, both after sex and innovation. And I think most of the inventors can agree on this. It is like a child. So innovation and sex are much alike, but there are also differences. And the first difference is actually a statistical one. If you look at sex, you can only produce children. If you look at innovation, you can produce, well, products, you can produce processes, you can produce services, and you can even produce species. Species, I come back later. Then there's another statistical disadvantage from sex over innovation. That is, if you want to have reproductive sex, you have to have a man and a woman, still. But if you look at innovation, you can do it with anyone, anywhere, no gender issues, no ages. So innovation bears a really true statistical advantage over sex. Then there's another difference. If you look at sex, once the conception is there and the first, how to say, egg cell starts to develop, all the information that is fused is inside cell itself. In innovation, actually, all the information is stored outside. That's what patent attorneys do. They write papers, they file it at the patent office. The patent office collects all this information. And if you look, for example, at this little product, it's only a metal wire, but there are some 2,000 patents filed on only this little invention. They're not inside this product, they're outside stored. And that is a huge, huge and important difference because people, they die. And innovations, because this information is outside, live on forever. And that's a huge difference, and that's also a huge advantage for innovation when you compare it with sex. Then there's another thing. If you look at sex, it's a man's world. It is James Brown who already saw this. If you look at the total number of inventors, and these are the most interesting people on the planet. These are my clients. These are the innovators. There's only 3% of the innovators is female. And this is a problem. And if you look at, I would say, the glass ceiling, that some women are, we see that there is a glass ceiling, that women don't get to the highest level. This glass ceiling is actually part of a glass building. And this glass building has glass walls and a glass foundation. This is the foundation. And we should all think about this and work about this, because 3% of inventors, we are really missing almost half of our innovative power, because women are not so active on this field. I believe that once this glass foundation is broken, the glass ceiling will fall down. And it is really, I think, important for us all. Well, if we look at the pregnancy differences, after sex it's 9 months mostly, and once the innovation is, how would I say, once the conception is there, you cannot change it anymore, or not as much. If you look at innovation, in this case, the development of manned flight. This pregnancy was almost 5,000 months. And during this pregnancy, there were lots of changes. So also in this case, innovation is more, has more flexibility and advantages over sex. Well, if you look at species, we have to consult this man. It's not my father. This is Charles Darwin. And in the 19th century, he wrote a book about the origin of species, and it's actually a legal framework. He saw that, well, how species develop, they more or less work around these rules. And actually, there's two major differences. If you look at innovation instead of sex, there's not really a reproductively, innovation does not really reproduce and does not get extinct. And this really means a big difference. If you look at the tree of life, then there is here a sort of linearity in time. You cannot really get properties from one species and combine it with others. If you look at innovation, time has no relevance. It's totally irrelevant. You can take an old technology and inject it in something new. And this has much to do with that the information is not inside the product, but outside. So also here, innovation bears quite a big advantage over sex. So well, if you look at all these advantages, what is the result of sex if you compare it to innovation? Well, about, if we say 12 million years of evolution has brought us about 5 million species. On the other hand, if you look at innovation, patent systems are around 600 years old, and we already have 90 million patents. So quite a bit more in quite a shorter time. If we look at this product, the human brain, it's a product of evolution and sex. And you look at the internet is only 40 years old and has already about the capacity of calculation of 10,000 human brains. And that we only made in 40 years. So it's really, there is something going on in this innovation that is really fascinating. Innovation actually leads to better and more solutions than sex. And if we look at the species level, the genetically modified organisms like plants and animals, there's about 3 to 4 times more genetically modified organisms that we created than that are endangered species on the world. And that's really fascinating. This will say we create more life than that we are threatening. And in the end, we will stop extinction of species. And that, for sure, is gravity defying. So if we look again at this problem, like you want to fly, but you're too heavy. Well, there are some solutions. The first one is like lowering your density. Second one is, well, you saw it already, is increasing your aerodynamics. And the third one is increasing your impulse. And this one, if you look at this, actually it's a sort of head full of information and a used booster engine to get you somewhere. Well, we've seen that before. And actually, this whole invention actually makes us that we will sooner or later go to other planets and really start to inhabit them. And there are already projects, and that is really gravity defying. So if you look at the biodiversity or the spreading of life or new sports or whatever, innovation is truly gravity defying. So what I wanted to say to you all, innovate, take your ideas, work them out and defy gravity. Thank you very much.